Hey, Donna, can you hear us? Hey, Donna, can you hear us? We can hear you. Hello, Donna. Hello. Oh. That's me talking. Hey, Donna, can you hear us? Where's the chat box? There it is. Check, Donna, check. Can you hear us? Nope, she left. At least she got the message.
Let's turn the video back on.
Okay, at this time, Lisa, would you like to discuss the December 2020 financial statement?
Here to turn your,
Sure.
oh, here, let me go back to the.
Okay, so just a real quick summary of what I'll discuss. We have our operating revenues for December of 2020, our operating expenses, the cash balance for ending the year, the special transportation services budget for 2020, and our capital through December. The first slide. It's the side one. Okay, so the middle columns are actual revenue for 2020.
People hear me?
Yes, Donna, we can hear you.
Okay, the actual revenue for 2020 is combined in total for $28,539,791. We ended the year $6,405,511 more than what we had originally budgeted, which is about 28.9%. And the reason for that really mainly is the CARES Act funding that we received from the federal government due to the COVID. I've had this in my notes, but I'm going to go over it again. COVID 2020 was really a very volatile year for several reasons. But as you can see with the fares and the contract fares for 2020 in that middle column, we had about $481,299 in fares, and our contract fares were around $621,831. So if you take that and you subtract it from your original budget, it gives you an idea of what our lost revenue was just due to the circumstances, which totals about $1.6 million. Again, in 2020, we had new sales tax revenue. That levy was passed in November of 2019. We did not actually get that money until our May distribution, which was received in July. But due to the sales tax, we have about approximately $6,921,000 in new revenue for the year, starting from May on. Again, we had that one-time CARES Act federal funding, and that's probably one of the main reasons for the increase in the revenue compared to budget. And then also, at the end of this year, we had miscellaneous revenue, which is also higher, and that's due to two one-time worker compensation compensation reimbursements totaling $871,064. Those are above and beyond. We do normally get one reimbursement sometimes from workers' compensation around $200 and some $1,000, but again, this was due to the COVID. So that's why I wanted to highlight those items. And then if we go on, there's a graph that kind of just shows what we budgeted versus our actual for 20 and our actual for 19. And then our year-to-date expenses for December. And again, due to COVID, we didn't spend as much, but then we did spend more on certain areas just due to the fact of COVID and happening to buy just the sprays and the cleaning supplies and all those extra things due to the pandemic. Our total expenses year to date were 17 million, that middle column, $17,507,688. We were $673,312, which was about 3.7% less than what we had originally budgeted. I broke down at the bottom in red for you just to give you an idea of what our wages and benefits were compared to our total expenses for 2020, and I also did it for 2019. There's a couple things that kind of stand out. One is the utilities and insurance. When you compare 20 to 19, we are self-insured on our health and dental insurance. We're also self-insured on all of our property, liability, and vehicle insurance. And because of that self-insurance, we made a one-time contribution for those self-insurance purposes in 2019 versus the 2020. It's not required every year. And that's why you have that difference. The other that stands out is the capital contribution. We originally were trying to include that because we did not always do a capital report to the board, and we didn't want to lose sight of what our capital contributions were for our capital purchases. But since we are doing that now, it shows up under 19, but it doesn't show up under 20. And I'll show you that as we get to the cash balance and the capital contribution in the next couple slides. And then if we go to the next slide, there's just a graph that kind of shows our budget versus our 2020 actual versus our 2019 actual. And then this is our cash balance. Operating, we have about $8,507,449. And I this time broke out capital because we have the headquarters building that we're participating in. And I thought that would be important to break that out versus our regular capital. So for regular capital, we have $5,495,885 set aside. And that's really like to help with our 20% contributions for all the buses and just miscellaneous expenses, security, and all those extra things that we buy and need. The headquarters building, and this again is as of December, so we're in February, so things are a little bit different today than what they are. Headquarters, we have $10,971,389. And basically that's made up of we're setting the workers' compensation, the CARES Act funding, and our 20% share that we should give on what we're estimating the cost. And I think our cost at that time is a little bit lower than what it is as of today. And then I'll change that as we go through and do January and February's financial reports. And then the final is the STS. We have $641,660 in cash. So yes, our cash balance has grown for 2020. And the reason it has grown too is because of all these things with COVID and these extra revenue streams that we got to help us offset some of our lost revenues and our additional expenses throughout the year. And then our next slide is our special transportation services. We started this back in 2019. It was service that we provide if people wanted to contract to do things that we can't do through our normal operations, such as rides for special purposes like the seniors going to the casinos. But this really, because of the COVID, we haven't done a whole lot. We've done a little bit, but not a whole lot since March of 2020. So therefore, our budget on this one is way lower than what we had originally estimated. So our total revenue we received for the year is $14,108,000. Again, it's the middle column, actual revenue. So we're $39,392 or 73.6% less than what we originally budgeted. And for our expenses, we're at $47,648, and we're about $69,352 or 59.3% less than what we had originally budgeted.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes.
go back on the. So what I'm seeing here is that we had expenses that were about 3 times greater than our revenues. Is that mainly due to the rent of the building for the bus storage?
Yes. So under services, that would be our rent for the building. That's really our only. I'm pretty sure that was our only service for last year. There might be a small amount for something else, but I'm pretty sure that's our services expense. And then the wages and benefits would be, some of the dial-a-ride or motor bus trips that we did. And originally, most of those were done before March because it was before the COVID hit. And then, of course, we have insurance too on those buses because those buses cannot be part of our fleet for it's all owned by Laketran, but it can't be part of our fleet we have to keep it separate.
It would have been nice if we could have matched the 2019 revenues at least. I realize that 2020 was an unusual year for that, and second year in business, hopefully that continues, the revenues continue to rise, and this was just a unnecessary blip in the economy.
Yeah, last year was a very challenging and different year, to say the
Yeah.
least.
No argument there.
The other thing in there, Chuck, is we still went over monthly and gave the buses a short little drive, because if we allowed them to sit for the full, 12 months now without running them, they would need a bunch of repairs. So there are some wages in here for mechanics doing kind of just a check on the buses too. So
Okay.
some unusual expenses that wouldn't normally happen also.
We hope that 21, we can increase those revenues quite a bit then.
How has the revenue looked in 21 thus far?
For
Probably
SDS,
global.
we still really haven't had any activity yet. Just, senior centers are still closed and everything. So
Okay.
it'll probably be, I would guess, halfway through the year before we see any significant activity again, but you never really know. Things have been improving recently with cases and stuff. So kind of a wait and see.
So we may not really know how this is doing until 2022.
It's possible. I mean, we monitor it and kind of, talk to the senior centers about how things are. And, there's still a lot of unknowns for, what people will return to doing. But
Understood.
Is there any other questions? I got one more slide and I'll.
Move on.
Okay, so here's our capital projects as of December 2020. We have federal, we have about $31,788,961. States about $3,970, and our local share is about $15,778,792, for a total of $51,537,753 total for our capital expenses. And this is why we're doing the capital piece now. I mean, we always did it, but we just didn't do it in a report to the board, just because due to the sheer nature of the expenses, it's nice to kind of give an idea of what we're spending it on. And then in my notes, I have the estimated headquarters costs as of December was at about 11.2 million, made up of the 9,638,819,000 in local funding and federal funding of 1,570,000. However, the CARES Act, we aren't allowed to just designate it for for capital. It had to be used on our operating expense piece, but because we got that, it was a one-time revenue. We're going to set that aside because we weren't anticipating that to help with that building cost. So unless I'm good, unless you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Lisa? At this time, is there a motion to approve the financial statement for December 2020, subject to audit?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McNamee, seconded by Mr. Schiavone. Vicky, if you could please call the roll.
Martin. Martin.
I think you're on mute, John.
Martin.
Yes.
McNamee.
Yes.
Schiavone. Yes.
Sheets.
Yes. Spence.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to discussing employee uniforms.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So the background, Laketran provides uniforms for all of its drivers that reflect the quality and professionalism of the organization and the service we provide. This is a routine procurement. The last time that we went out for a uniform contract out to bid was in 2018, and that current 3-year contract expires in April of 21. So the uniform program includes an initial offering for new drivers, a yearly spring order for current employees to replace old garments, and a fall supplemental order, which each driver receives a $90 stipend. If a driver exceeds their stipend, they must pay out of pocket. So On average, we spend about $42,000 a year on uniforms, and that's including the supplemental items. Part-timers, part-time employees for the initial offering receive 6 shirts, 3 pairs of pants, 1 parka, and 1 rain jacket. When they become full-time, they receive 2 additional shirts and 2 additional pairs of pants. And then every spring, part-timers receive 1 shirt, 1 pair of pants. Full-timers receive 2 shirts, 2 pairs of pants. And then the parka is replaced every 3 years in the fall. And then some supplemental items that they can order are other styles of jackets. We have thicker coats, thinner coats, that type of thing, vests, hats, belts, or additional uniform items. So Laketran issued a RFP on December 21st, 2020, and this was sent to 12 vendors. There was a non-mandatory pre-proposal meeting that was held on Zoom on January 13th, and 2 vendors were in attendance. That was Garment Specialties and UniFirst. Proposals were due on January 25th. 2 proposals were received and 1 no bid was received. So in addition to completing the accurate bid documents, proposers were required to provide actual uniform pieces for evaluation. So the proposal from Uniforms Manufacturing of Arizona was deemed non-responsive because they did not submit a bid for the uniform pants or the parka. That is a key component of the Laketran uniform, and they did not submit actual sample garments for evaluation. This is usually a very key aspect because we use these sample garments to look at the quality of the item. So Garment Specialties is the current vendor for the uniform program, and they are the only vendor that was fully responsive. So for the evaluation, the supplemental items are not included, and there are averages because different pieces of the uniform cost different amounts based on size, based on styles, that type of thing. So shirts, $28.44 average cost for shirts. Pants, $60.38. Parkas, $62.80. And rain jackets, $53.83. So the initial offering for part-timers would be $468.41. The supplemental additional shirts and pants that a full-timer would get, $177.64. And then current employees, just the refresh, $88.82 for part-time and $177.64 for full-time employees. And then of course the parka that is replaced every 3 years. Is there any questions?
Yes, Matt. So one thing that jumped out at me being a little unusual is there is no not to exceed price in this contract. Is that because you're saying that items vary based on size?
That is correct.
But we're still not going to put any kind of cap at what this is for?
Yeah, there's no cap on this actual request because these are all already included in the regular budget that the board approves. The challenge is we don't know exactly how much this will cost throughout the term of the contract each year, but it is part of the budget overall. we haven't in the past traditionally put a cap on expenditures. We could, on average, we spend $42,000 a year. So we could always put a cap on it at that dollar amount or slightly higher than that. And if we go over that, we could bring it back to the board. I don't think that would be a challenge at all for this year and future years. Or for just $42,000 a year and then bring it back if it goes over. That would be also easy to do.
How much has it fluctuated in the past, Ben?
It's really based on, how many people we hire. Do you have that number, Matt?
So last year was actually a little high, or a lot higher than usual. We were at $57,000 last year, and that actually brought our average up. That is because we hired 4 or 5 classes of drivers last year, totaling about 38 people, I believe. So usually it's around 40,000 is what we end up spending.
Any questions from anyone else?
In terms of what we're hiring this year, Ben, we're not going to have that many new hires in terms of our drivers. Is that correct?
It's hard to say right now with how COVID is moving. We've sort of let the total number of drivers contract throughout COVID. So we may have some additional hiring spurts this year. I wouldn't think we would have that many, but it also depends on who retires, and there's a lot of factors in there. So I can't say with 100% certainty what type of hiring we're going to do. We haven't done any major hiring this year so far. We don't really have any on the immediate horizon. But, as the vaccine becomes more readily available, it's possible later this year, this summer, this fall, we may consider hiring some groups of folks. But, I would say that our average numbers would probably be very safe for this year. If the board would like to cap this, in the low 40s, I think that would be not a problem at all.
Any other questions or comments for Ben? I'm going to read this resolution with a price of not to exceed $42,000. At this time, is there a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the CEO or his designee to enter into and execute an agreement with garment specialists at a cost not to exceed $42,000 for calendar year 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Sheets, seconded by Ms. McNamee. Vicky, if you could please call the roll.
Martin,
Yes.
McNamee,
Yes.
Scivone,
I think we lost Dale again.
Sheets,
Yes.
Spence,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble,
Yes.
I'm a yes. I lost the internet connection again.
Scivone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Our next item on the agenda is the possible elimination of Route 13. And Ben, I'm not at the right page, but I'm going to turn it over to you and you can direct where need be.
Sure. So I'll start off with the background of Route 13. So Route 13 is one of our commuter express runs that provides service to downtown Cleveland and to the near west side. It's the only route that provides service to the near west side. Route 13's ridership has always been very stable. Really, its primary market since its inception was to provide access to St. Ignatius, just on the west side of, beyond the west side of Cleveland. We have had some other customers use it, but it only has one AM and one PM run. So you only have one time to catch it. So unless you have a specific, work time that aligns with this run, it's not that easy to use as a traditional customer. I have some additional background I can discuss with individual board members if they'd like about its creation for the St. Ignatius service. But it really, if there's a lot of kids that choose to ride it this year, ridership is good. If there's not a lot of kids, ridership is bad. So it's never kind of really fit with a lot of the services and the way we have sort of served the community in the past. It uses one MCI to provide service. Right now, we would keep that bus and repurpose it as a spare, or if the board decides to move forward with service to University Circle, we could put it into service then. One of the things about Route 13 that is different than our other commuter express runs is that we have no infrastructure or physical assets other than the bus that are used in the provision of this service. Our other park and rides all have park and ride lots that we own and operate as part of their service. Route 13's primary lot that is used are the shops of Willoughby Hills. That's a challenge to make the route successful because we don't own the facility, we can't control it, so that is difficult. It also is just, a challenge for customers because we can't market well, and it just makes it hard to do a good job. In 2021, we would expect this route to cost us $127,632 if we ran it for the whole year. We would plan on saving this money just in general, or if the board decided to run service to University Circle, we could repurpose it. And right now there is one full-time driver assigned to the run, same as the other two, as the bus and the funds. This person would be repurposed into Dial-A-Ride. We would save a little bit of money because of that, because the rate that drivers are paid to do Dial-A-Ride is lower than the rate they are paid to do commuter express service. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia at this point, who will go over our plans for the actual public hearing process, unless anybody has any questions about the background.
I have a question. What is our average ridership under normal circumstances?
Matt?
So in 2019, we had approximately 17 people per day on that run.
That's
So
5 days a week.
So that's taking the total ridership divided by the operating days.
And the reason he presented it in days of week is because the school schedules impact that. So it's difficult to look at the average ridership on the route even in months because of school.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do we have any agreement or contract with St. Ignatius for this service?
No, this service was created by us on our own accord. There was no agreement or coordination or contract with St. Ignatius at the time. And there hasn't been one since.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, we are free and clear to do what we choose with this run.
I thought we should have dropped it in 2009.
I wasn't here then, so I can't speak to that. One of the reasons this is a good time is this eliminates the route right as school ends. So if there are any students relying on it, they can kind of get a reset for the next school year, which does, help out anyone who is currently using it. And I didn't mention, but there is very easy access for other routes that will get students to downtown Cleveland. Route 12 is only 1.5 miles away. It has a lot of service. It doesn't go to the near west side, but one of the interesting patterns about Route 13 is the students use it in the morning and they don't use it at night. They ride RTA and transfer to our other routes. So there's no reason to believe they couldn't transfer in the morning the same way they do in the evening. So there really still is an option for people who want to go to St. Ignatius, but I'm not sure how well specific service at St. Ignatius aligns with, our general mission statement and objectives. Anybody have any other background questions before I turn it over to Julia?
Isn't that kind of odd that they're using it one way but not the other? All of them?
Well, there's a lot of things odd about this route that you think one of these things is not like the others. This is the one that's not like the others.
Okay, I'll accept that and let's go forward. How are we going to do this?
The return commute had a lot to do with students' activities after school and whether or not they needed, the school let out a lot earlier than sometimes the return. So,
that would make sense.
yeah, so some stayed for activities and some didn't.
So is that unless anybody has any additional background questions, I'm going to give it to Julia to kind of explain what the process will be, because this will be a unique public hearing for us being remote.
Yeah, it'll be a very unique public hearing. So one, because it's remote, and two, we haven't had to do any for eliminating services very often in the past. So that being said, we have a Laketran public hearing and procedures process that is reviewed, and I think just passed again last year or earlier, last year. And so that we also file with the FTA. So we are required by the FTA to go through any type of public hearing process when we want to eliminate a route. And so that's why we have this public hearing ahead of you today. So with your approval tonight to move into the public hearing process, we will advertise it starting Wednesday. And our public hearings will be advertised in the News Herald, which is the public source, the local public record, as well as on our old social media websites and newsletter that goes out to our ridership in the community. Then we have to wait for 10 days. We have to advertise it for 10 days, and then we can have our actual hearings. So we will also inform key stakeholders who will consider the mayors or city managers of the communities the service operates in, as well as our contact at St. Ignatius. We will hold 2 virtual hearings. We wanted to do one during the day and then one in the evening should any of the students want to participate and they're in classes during the day. We'll hold those on Wednesday, March 10th. We then will continue our public comment period for 14 days, again mandated through our public hearing process in the FTA. And then we'll come back to you next month with the results and our recommendations. Once we have those recommendations and results and anything that might be approved by the board, we'll go ahead and start informing the community on any changes that might take place. As Ben mentioned, this timeline lines up very well to inform St. Ignatius students. Also, we can provide them information about the Route 12. Obviously with the transit center we're building there's a lot better amenities and a lot more times to get downtown. So I think overall, a lot of the students might actually see transitioning to Route 12 as a benefit for the families. And then with our new pick in May, on May 24th, it's a good day to start our new services without Route 13. That also gives us time to, improve, everything we have to update if we do decide to eliminate it, the websites and any signage out in the community. So public comments can also be submitted to me at hearings at laketran.com. So we meet all the ADA recommendations for people to be able to submit. And like I said before, these are the places we will be advertising the public hearings: the News Herald website, stakeholder letters, our newsletter, onboard flyers to the customers who are on board the Route 13, as well as through social media. Do you have any questions?
Sounds good.
Pretty standard process. So with that, we're just requesting the approval of the attached resolution authorizing the CEO or designee to commence the public hearing process to obtain input on the elimination of Route 13.
And just as a reminder to the board, the outcome of the public hearings does not require the board to act in any specific way. So regardless of the outcome of the public hearings, we and the board are free to make any decision we choose. The objective is just to get feedback from the community we can use in our decision-making process.
Any questions from the board for Ben or Julia? At this time, is there a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the CEO or his designee to commence the public hearing process to obtain input on the elimination of Route 13?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McNamee, seconded by Ms. Spence. Vicky, if you could please call the roll.
Martin,
Yes.
McNamee,
Yes.
Scavone,
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Spence,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I believe I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Ben for the 6-month look ahead.
Yeah, so if you turn to your packet on page 29, you'll see the February 6-month look ahead. There have been some kind of shuffles and changes since January, so I'll go through those somewhat quickly. In March, we expect to have a landscape bid to award for all of our sites except for headquarters. The state has requested that we move our state grant authority up to March based on some pending activities that they have. Normally, we would do this in July. Just as a reminder, we do that every year. So that is a pretty routine item. Just ODOT's request is to move it forward in the year. In April, I plan to have RL Bowen here to present the updated design process. They have told me that Laketran should have the design development document in our hands on March 12th for sort of our initial staff review. And then I assume we will get together with them to go over it, but we should have a good presentation available in April for the board. The employee engagement results should also be presented in April by Pradco. The survey closed last Friday. We were above average for participation, which is great. They told me their normal participation is 69.5%. We were in the mid 70s. So we saw, better than average employee presentation or participation. The board will be asked to approve the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP. We have to approve that annually. We expect to present an action to hire a strategic plan consultant. For May, the electric bus should be here late April, which will allow us to do a sort of a demonstration, show and tell, whatever the board may or may not like with that new electric bus. We will present you with the public hearing results we'll do that in April. I forgot to move that, my apologies. I'm not moving along at the same speed. It's got to do two things at once. We'll prevent the public hearing results in April, and then in May, we will seek approval for the equivalent service plan. Again, this is an annual activity. In June, we will request our federal grant authority, which is again a routine process which occurs annually. We don't currently have any items for July as a result of that state grant authority moving. August is our recess. And then in September, we will seek, in theory, approval to award a construction contract for the headquarters renovation project. And then we will seek approval of our certified annual financial statement, or certified annual financial report, excuse me. Does anybody have any questions about any of those sort of things we are, currently looking at into the future? All right, so that concludes the 6-month look ahead. Brian, if you'd like, I can just roll right into the CEO report.
Sounds great. Thank you.
On page 31 of your packet is the CEO report for this month. We have had a new development for headquarters, which is nothing totally shocking, but we have received the actual allocation for the, we call it the CRISA Act, or whatever acronym you'd like to use for all those letters. But the actual dollar amount has been solidified. We expect to be able to use those funds within, or apply for those funds within 30 to 60 days. We will do the same thing with those funds we did with the CARES Act, where we will spend them directly on operations and essentially bank our sales tax, which will give us, ultimate flexibility for how we choose to spend those funds in the future. So as of right now, the amount of local dollars that would be required would be right around $5.4 million for the project at an $18 million construction budget.
Now, this was the one that was passed at the end of 20?
This, if you're counting them, this would be the second stimulus bill.
Okay.
So there is another one in discussion with Congress right now. If that one were to pass, the last number I saw was $30 billion for transit, which would result in us receiving between $8 and $9 million, which would obviously overfund the building project and leave us extra for something else if it passes that way. But we don't know how that will end up going. We rolled out a product called Blink. which I'm very excited about. Bus drivers are a notoriously difficult to communicate group. As you can imagine, we only see them for 15 to 20 minutes a day. So it's very difficult to communicate with them on a regular basis for sort of non-critical matters. We have a very successful process for getting them memos about, important company policies, but sort of the little sort of more touchy-feely, but more, informal items. We don't put out a memo to say, hey, look at the progress of the transit center. So this product is really a way that allows us to have much more direct communication with the bus drivers. It's a two-way communication tool, so they can ask us questions, and just generally, I think every company can always, generally do a better job with communication. That's something you sort of always hear is, we want a better job with communication. So we spent a long time trying to figure out how do we do that for bus drivers. And so this is a non-voluntary app that they can download. It's very structured. It has a lot of documents on it for them to access, but it also really, so far we've been using it for just over a month now, and there's been a lot of meaningful sort of dialogue and content on it. As we've shown them, non-priority memo worthy communications, and they've also, been able to reach out to us individually. If their shift doesn't align well with one of us, they can't walk into one of our offices. This allows them to communicate with us directly. So it's been a really nice sort of improvement in communications with specifically the bus drivers. Any employee can use it, but it really is aimed at those hard to communicate with employees. Update on the transit center at Lakeland. We have it scheduled for a soft opening March 8th. It is in the final inspection processes right now, so we are very excited about that. We will plan a grand opening once COVID is a little more under control and the weather is warmer and we can kind of do an outdoor event. We will be conducting a special employee-only open house on February 25th, which is this Thursday. If any of the board would like to stop by, you are more than welcome. We will be there from 10 to 2, sort of having all the doors open so that the drivers and other employees can sort of see everything in the building. It's not a huge building, so it doesn't take very long, but the board is certainly welcome to stop by and kind of see what's behind the scenes, see some of the electric charging infrastructure if that's of interest to you. To go along with that, this is some stuff that didn't quite make it into the written report because it changed between when I sent the packet out and now. The mask regulations were updated and went through the process to kind of become official for Laketran. So the TSA has issued guidance that as of January 31st, any person not wearing a mask in a transit vehicle or a transit facility can be fined up to $250. So that is any facility that Laketran operates. So, all of our transit centers, our park and rides, and headquarters. So the TSA has made the mask mandate, they've given it teeth. So I don't know exactly who will enforce that, but in general, mask wearing now can carry with it a fine of up to $250. So it's just a renewed emphasis on mask wearing. I had a conversation with Lane a couple days ago, and he asked me to include information about the tip and stip. So this is sort of a behind the scenes look into some of the bureaucracy that we operate in on a daily basis. I know Dale is well aware of the tip and stip. For those of you that aren't, TIP and STIP basically stands for Transportation Improvement Program and State Transportation Improvement Program. These are two lists that are maintained by NOACA. They are a list of every federal dollar that is spent in the NOACA region. So as you can imagine, it's a very extensive list. It has a very defined process to be approved. So anytime we want to spend federal money, any of our projects have to be on the TIP or STIP. So when we spend money on capitalized maintenance, when we buy a bus, when we do anything at all that involves federal money, this list has to contain that project. The list, it takes about 9 months to be updated. So from the day that we say, hey, we want to spend this money, it takes 9 months to get the item on the list. So even if the board said tonight, we want to spend $10 million of federal money, but the project wasn't on this list, we could not even apply from the federal government to get the money. when Andrea submits the grant, she sends them a copy of the list, which is managed by NOACA. So the tip and STIP contains 4 years worth of projects. We keep the list up to date with what we think we're going to do in the future. So it involves a little bit of sort of our crystal ball about what we think may happen. Each project has to be detailed with what type of federal money you're going to spend. So you can't just say, I'm going to spend $10 million of 5307 money. You have to say, I'm going to spend $10 million of 5307. And then each type of money has its own spot on the list. So for Laketran, when NOACA maintains the list, we start on page 206 and we go for several pages of, projects, which are typically very mundane projects. They are things the board is used to approving and seeing. Sometimes we put things on the list that we think we might do. There is no risk at all for us putting a project on the list, even if it's not completed. So the list does not have any consequences. If you say you put it on the list, but then you don't do the project, there are literally no repercussions. All the list is sort of like, think of it like a permission slip or a gatekeeper to use the federal money. So if we don't put something on the list, we can't spend the federal money. So it is sort of a very bureaucratic step and process that we have to live in. It requires us to sort of guess at what we're going to do in the future and guess at specifically what funds we're going to use for that project. So we are always updating this list with NOACA and ODOT. This list is updated somewhat regularly, and the state occasionally has the option to fast track it like they did with the CARES Act. But they don't usually do that. It's usually a 9-month approval process. So this is sort of, step 87 of the 150-step grant process. But it's just sort of one of the very layered levels of bureaucracy that we operate in on a daily basis and that we sort of, have to manage for grants. So, this is part of the process and it kind of, it's one of those, it is what it is things, but the good thing is there's really no risk for Laketran unless we don't have something on the list. That's the only thing that we ever are worried about is if it's not on the list, because like I said, it takes 9 months to revise. And that's just, if you want to move quickly on something or you want to do something, you really have to wait. So that is sort of a background on the tip and STIP. I know Dale knows probably more about it than I do. So I don't know if Dale wants to add anything to that very fascinating description of the tip and STIP, but yeah.
That basically covers it, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. I'd be happy to answer them, but that is the last part in my report.
Yes, I have a question. If it takes 9 months to get it on the list, how does this work with the CARES Act or one of the COVID stimulus funding bills for transit-related items? Does that mean that money from the second stimulus, then in order for Laketran to get those funds, it had to be on the list months ago?
No, there was a special process that took place for the CARES Act and for the stimulus acts where sort of some of those processes were waived, or ODOT or NOACA took special meetings and did special steps to complete that process so the money could be spent. So this would inhibit normal grant expenditures, but it has not inhibited both CARES, and we assume it will not inhibit the CRISA Act or any future stimulus dollars.
And tip and STIP is something that occurs in every state and MPO?
Yes, this is a federally required process, and so it is primarily managed by NOACA and by ODOT, and every region in the state and in the country uses this process. They use these lists, and they are required as part of the grant-making process.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions about anything on my report? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Did we have a director's report at all?
We do. The director's report for this month will be Keith, and he will be talking about propane.
Okay, I took a little deeper look at propane versus diesel fuel, diesel specifically, and we're using propane in our dial ride fleet. So purchasing the diesel fuel through the Akron Metro contract had pretty good benefits for Laketran. We're able to get it at the lowest possible cost. In 2020, our cost per gallon was $2.08 per gallon on diesel, where the national average of the time was $2.58 per gallon. Another big benefit for us in maintenance is we had a steady supplier. If there's ever an issue with the fuel, we can backtrack exactly where the fuel came from instead of going from different vendors. So I looked at some propane costs, and through our original procurement for propane, you don't buy it on a fixed price contract. It's a standardized commodity price, and the bid was for delivery and transportation. We weren't expecting to see big variances in the price of propane per gallon, but our cost for 2020 averaged 70.81 cents per gallon compared to the diesel fuel. So for this report, I looked at two specific fleets. We had 2016 diesel Chevrolets. That's our newest Chevy diesel, or newest diesel in a cutaway, and our 2019 Ford propane buses. I looked at our cost per mile, the materials cost on oil changes, the environmental impact, and I listed some issues that we've seen in maintenance with both. So every month I report to the board our cost per mile, diesel against propane and unleaded. That's our whole diesel fleet, which includes our MCIs and our new flyers. This report specific to just these 12 dial rides. The miles per gallon on a diesel as reported is better than propane. Propane doesn't get as far per gallon, but the cost of the propane, that 70 cents against $2, makes up a lot of the difference there. So I'm showing that we're saving there's a cost per mile savings of 4 cents, 0.41 per mile. So in this test group, we're seeing a 25% fuel savings using propane, or a cost savings using propane. Our normal miles run pre-COVID was roughly around 35,000 miles on average per bus. So that's one of the numbers I continue to use through this report. So at 35,000 miles, a savings of 4.41 cents per mile is about $1,500 per bus. And we have 42 buses right now with another 4 on order. So the next thing I looked at was just the oil change. A propane bus runs on an unleaded engine platform. And for our service, it's considered severe duty. We do our PMs, our oil changes at 5,000 miles compared to the 7,500 miles in diesels. So we're expect at that 35,000 mile range to do 7 oil changes on a propane bus annually compared to 4.67 on a diesel. The price for the oil filter, the oil, and how much oil goes into the bus is where all the savings is. Our oil is half the price of diesel oil, and the oil we're using is a re-refined product. So it's been reblended, reformulated. It was used once, so it's basically a green recycled product. Again, at the 35,000 miles per year, we're expected to save $96.67 per bus on just the equipment, the parts to complete an oil change. So then I got into the environmental impact. Diesel engines have changed over the last decade. Strict EPA standards are cleaning up particulate matter and NOx out of diesel engines. In 2004, they went to an EGR system, which is exhaust gas recirculation, trying to clean up the motors. 2006, they introduced ultra low sulfur diesel with a diesel content of 15 parts per million, which was down from over 5,000 parts per million. In 2007, the standards were met using a diesel particulate filter. It's a filter in the exhaust, another component where your exhaust needs regular service. In the 2010 requirements was the reduced NOx was SCR, or selective catalytic reduction, and the use of DEF fluid. So this is shooting a fluid into the exhaust system to help burn off all this NOx. With all these improvements, they reduced particulate levels to 0.01 grams and NOx to 0.2 grams. Our propane systems that we bought in 2017 met the 0.05 grams, or beat the NOx emissions from 2010 by a quarter, or 75%, with an option to drop down to 0.02 grams. And people often say sometimes the air coming out of the tailpipe is cleaner than the air going in. So this is just a chart that Roush supplied me. These are the standards that are planned to come out in the future. Like I said, in 2010, they have a 0.2 grams of NOx, and that's with a diesel oxidation catalyst and a DPF, diesel particulate filter, with the SCR, which is the catalyst. In 2024, they're adding more components to the engines, to the exhaust system, that require more maintenance to drop us down to 0.05 NOx. The level where our 2017 buses are, we're meeting the 2024 requirements of a diesel in 2017. In 2027, again, more components to the exhaust system, more maintenance, more service, more expense, and our newest buses that are on order now with the new engine in them should meet these NOx requirements of 2027. So this is, yes.
NOx is it nitrogen oxides or what?
Nitrates of oxygen, yes.
Right. I'm not sure everybody knew that.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
So this is a picture of the SCR and DPF in one of our Chevrolet buses. This part cost $1,800 plus the lines on them to service them. And you'll see a port there for an injector to go in and a sensor in the side of it. With this system in our 2016 buses, DEF, which is diesel exhaust fluid, is required. If the system is low on DEF or it's contaminated, it goes into low engine speed, sometimes requiring a tow to get it back to the base. DEF tanks and injectors, again, the DEF purity is key and the product could freeze. It has to be kept warm. It does go into, the diesel engines are designed to go into a self-cleaning stage. It's when engine temperatures are up and speed is maintained. It's known as regen through the industry. But speeds have to be maintained for quite a few miles. I want to say it's 30 to, each manufacturer is different, but it's above 30 to 40 miles where speeds have to be maintained at engine temperature. Our service doesn't allow this. These are on our cutaway buses. We do a lot of door-to-door. It's a lot of stop and go. So mechanics will either have to take it out on a 30 to 40 mile test drive or use a computer system, get it up to temperature, use a computer system and force it into a regen here in our parking lot, which is still about a 40-minute process. So some of the issues we've experienced on the propane buses, Spark plugs in Ford engines have had their issues through the years. Back in the day, the first generation of this same displacement motor was blowing spark plugs out of the engine. We're seeing every once in a while that when we replace the spark plugs, it pulls the threads out. We just have to retap the head and put a helicoil in, basically replace the threads in the head. We've had some injector failures. You know, this is not a Ford part. Most of these we see are when the bus is shortly after it's first delivered. Not a lot of failures, but all of them with parts and labor have been covered by a Roush, who is the upfitter of the propane system. Coil packs, we expect them to last over 100,000 miles. They have a 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty. We've had just a couple of failures. Then fuel pumps, the warranty is 5 years, 100,000 miles. This again is a Roush part. We had a couple failures early on, not a lot. And these are also covered by Roush under warranty, both parts and labor. Then the fuel gauge is not always accurate. They pulled the fuel tank out of the bus to put in a propane tank. So it's not always accurate, and there's some variances in it. But with operations filling our bus, every time they return, the gauge is not so much an issue here. Then on the DEF system, fuel tank heaters, we've had a couple failures with those. It becomes important. Like this type of weather, the fluid freezes and the bus will basically shut down. Here's our NOx again, our NOx sensors. There's a 5-year, 100,000 mile Chevy powertrain warranty. We have moderate failures on these. We often see those go after the warranty period. We're seeing them about 130,000 miles, 130, 150,000 miles. There's 2 NOx sensors per system. The indirect injector, that's a very common failure because that's what's injecting the diesel exhaust fluid into the exhaust. That product crystallizes in the air. So we see common failures, not often in the warranty period. Our most common failures on these are the glow plugs. It's what warms the engine so the diesel can start. They are covered under warranty for 100,000 miles on a powertrain. It's a $25 part and about a half-hour fix. It's often not valuable for us to send 2 people to take a bus to Classic to have it sit there to get a $25 part. It's more beneficial for us to fix it here in-house with an aftermarket glow plug. And then our fuel tanks, we've had a lot of fuel tank failures, usually after 3 years. It's after the warranty is expired on the bus, and it's just rot. It's the stuff we're putting on the roads in Northeast Ohio. And then looking at the fuel itself, see what I see is some of the differences. I list, in cold weather, we have no issues with propane. Diesel fuel can gel in extreme cold, turn into like jelly. That's why there's some heaters on fuel tanks. And like I said, our diesel exhaust fluid will freeze. The operation of the fuel in cold weather, diesel buses, they don't make a lot of heat. We have real hard time getting passenger heat out of our heater cores at low speed or idling. Propane, there's no issues making heat in the cold weather. In hot weather, no issues with the diesel fuel, but propane in extreme heat, because you're pushing a pressurized liquid into a tank, it's a little slower to refuel. Not that I've heard a lot of complaints operationally from any drivers about that. The storage, ultra low sulfur diesel allows growth of bacteria. A lot of people call it algae, but it's really fungus, mold, and bacteria. Has to be filtered out. It plugs up fuel filters. We're better than most because we cycle our fuel, and I ensure that we're treating it with the proper additives. Propane on the other hand doesn't deteriorate, can be stored for decades because it's stored in airtight tanks. And then defueling for if we did have on a diesel end, a tank replacement, or on the propane end, a pump replacement, you have to drain the fuel tanks on them. We own the transfer systems for both systems. Near one of them are real fast. Propane defueling is relatively slower because we're pulling out of the bus and pumping it into the big tank out behind the building. So that was all I had for my director's report, unless there's any questions.
The purpose of that was just to kind of give the board, I know you all remember when we switched from diesel to propane, this was sort of a follow-up on how we were doing. And so the bottom line of what Keith is saying tonight is that propane is still, it is what we thought it is. It saves a good chunk of money and, these are sort of like our experience with it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the comparison of propane versus diesel.
I don't really have any questions about it, but I just wanted to tell Keith, I mean, this is an excellent analysis and presentation of the facts. And I see all of these facts being very relevant for our area. And I'm really glad to see that you went to this level of detail to compare it. So obviously, propane has got an advantage going forward. And as long as the price, I guess, of propane does not vary a lot over time and stays where it is vis-a-vis diesel, that should be the driving force in the future. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, great job, Keith.
Thank you for the compliment.
Any other questions or comments for Keith? Great. Well, thank you so much, Keith. Ben, I believe there are no other directors' reports.
That is correct. Keith was this month's report.
Is there any old business in the room? Any new business in the room? At this time, is there a motion to adjourn today's Board of Trustees meeting?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Ms. McNamee, seconded by Mr. Schiavone. Vicky, if you could please call a roll.
Martin,
Yes.
McNamee,
Yes.
Schiavone,
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Spence, Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Hey, thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned at 6:04, and I hope everyone has a nice rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Brian.
All right, bye now.
Bye.